We're following breaking news on Wall Street with stocks tumbling right now. All three indices showing sharp declines today. Let's go live to CNN business and politics correspondent Vanessa Yurkevich. Vanessa, walk us through what's behind this decline.
Well, markets opened rattled this morning because Beijing was essentially putting pressure on their trading partners not to work with the U.S. On essentially not trading with China any longer. And then after that, there was a Truth Social post by President Trump that came out, which sort of rattled markets again. And that's why you're seeing that steep decline. The Dow down 1,100 points now. But you can see the post right there where he's essentially calling on the Federal Reserve to cut rates. This is something that the president really has no power doing. And when he talks about Mr. Too Late, he's talking about the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell. Over the last week or so, he's really ratcheted up his pressure on the Fed chair, essentially calling for his termination, saying if I could terminate him at some point, I will. The president appointed Jerome Powell in his first term. President Biden re-upped him for his second term. And ultimately, President Trump there, though, saying that he has the power to remove the Fed chair, Jerome Powell. But that is not necessarily the case here. And there's some legal precedent for that says that the president does not have the authority to remove the chair of the Federal Reserve unless there are three sort of different qualifications: inefficiency, neglect of duty, malfeasance of office. So that is why there's so much question about whether or not the president has the power to make this move. But this is why you see markets rattled right now, because the Federal Reserve is an independent body from the government, and it acts sort of as a safety net for the U.S. economy. And when you have the president threatening to remove the Federal Reserve chair or trying to direct the Federal Reserve to make any sort of monetary policy, that rattles investors and traders who see this Federal Reserve Bank as sort of an independent catch-all for potential issues with the economy. And one of those issues, Boris, as you know, that is playing out right now is this global trade war. Many economists believe that this trade war, as it escalates, will increase prices for everyday consumers. And the Federal Reserve really is the sort of counteractive in that, the body that can help try to bring down prices if that were to happen. So traders, investors nervous about this language that they're seeing from the president right now. The next time the Fed will meet is in May, and that is when they will make that policy decision about interest rates. But it is up to the Federal Reserve. It is not up to the President of the United States to make those directives, Boris.
Vanessa Yurkevich, thank you so much for the update. Brianna?
Today, we are learning some new details following reports of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth sharing some detailed military plans in a second Signal group chat that included his wife, a lawyer, and his brother. Multiple sources telling CNN Hegseth revealed strike plans against Houthi targets in Yemen, similar to what was shared in that other group chat, which came to light after the editor of The Atlantic was mistakenly added to it. We've also learned that Hegseth directly addressed the matter with President Trump during a phone call last night. Earlier today, the president defended Hegseth.
He's doing a great job. It's just fake news. They just bring up stories. I guess it sounds like disgruntled employees. You know, he was put there to get rid of a lot of bad people, and that's what he's doing. So you don't always have friends when you do that.
The revelation of a second Signal chat emerging as some of Hegseth's closest advisors, several of whom were fired last week, are warning that the Pentagon has become dysfunctional under Hegseth's leadership. Both Hegseth and White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt railed against those accusations.
This is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations.
The president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth, who is doing a phenomenal job leading the Pentagon. And this is what happens when the entire Pentagon is working against you and working against the monumental change that you are trying to implement.
With us now to talk more about this is John Bolton. He served as National Security Advisor during President Trump's first term. How bad do you think this is, I wonder, having his wife, his brother, his lawyer included on what sources describe as military plans of these Houthi strikes, similar to what came to light during that first Signal chat scandal?
Well, I think after people got over the disbelief at the first Signal chat group, it's no surprise there are others. What makes this one worse and different is that it's kind of a friends and family Signal chat group, none of whom have any need to know what's been conveyed about potential strikes in Yemen before they actually happen. I mean, it speaks to a lack of judgment on Hegseth's part. And when you look at the controversy over the people recently being fired, by the way, all of whom are people he hired within the past 90 days, it really gives the picture of a Secretary of Defense who's a lightweight, a dilettante. And that's not the kind of person you want as a Secretary of Defense under any circumstances, but particularly not in the challenging environment we find ourselves in today.
Let's talk about some of those top aides who are gone. I think some of whom, were it not for Hegseth or someone like Hegseth being in the position he's in, would not have had the positions they had at the Pentagon. But Senior Advisor Dan Caldwell, Deputy Chief of Staff Darren Selnick, Chief of Staff to the Deputy Secretary of Defense Colin Carroll. What's the effect of departures at a high level like that?
Well, as I say, I think he was responsible for hiring all of them. I mean, I think he had connections with them. He also lost his own chief of staff, who is either being fired or moved somewhere else in the Defense Department. I think what it says to the rest of that very big building and its partners around the world that they're just not serious in the Secretary of Defense's office. They don't have their act together managing a very small group of people. How's somebody like that ever going to lead the entire Pentagon? It's what you get when you don't really care about qualifications for jobs like that, when you're not picking people who are experienced, when your major qualification is personal fealty to Donald Trump. That's what he's got in Hegseth. That's why he's sticking with him. But it's not what you need to do the job.
His chief of staff resigning from his position. We're waiting to see if he lands somewhere else at the Pentagon. But in a Politico op-ed, John Oliot, the former chief Pentagon spokesman who resigned last week, said that dysfunction is now a major distraction and that it's hard to see how Hegseth remains in his role for much longer. Do you think that Hegseth should step down?
Well, by the way, Oliot is the fifth person in his inner circle who's now resigned. I think Hegseth should resign. I don't think he's going to. He may leave at some point because I think he's used up his bank account with Donald Trump. Trump doesn't want to have to waste his resources defending his people, and that's now what he's doing on Hegseth. But I think Trump is bound and determined not to show weakness, which is what he's worried he would do if he fires Hegseth or anybody else. So I think Hegseth has a shelf life of undetermined length, but it's not going to be much longer, would be my guess. 3 months, 4 months, something like that, likely.
You hear the talking point. We just heard it from Hegseth, Leavitt, and Trump himself, which is that they're blaming people who are just upset that he's trying to implement institutional change. What do you think of that argument?
Well, again, these five people are all people he brought in and who have said they're in favor of the change that he's trying to make. They just don't think he's qualified to do it. I think it's a very weak response when Hegseth can't even manage and hold together the people he himself is responsible for hiring. It's sort of like the same problem his boss seems to have.
John Bolton, always great to have you. Thanks so much for being with us.
Glad to be with you.